Well, good morning. It's fitting that we have this remembrance here at the Crane Library in the Richardson room. As you all know, the wing was built under the leadership of Jim Sheets. So I think it's an appropriate place here for us to gather and honor such a wonderful man. You could be hearing from a few old timers.
We are now.
Ooh. And then members of the Sheets family. If I might, just a couple of welcome remarks. I'm truly blessed to serve as mayor of the city. I first met Jim Sheets in the classroom, which was the old yellow courthouse that used to be across the street here. And I think it was local government. That's when we connected. Not long after that, it was in the 80s, he reached out and we had a luncheon meeting at the NFPA, and he asked me if I would support him and help run his campaign, along with Rhonda Merrill, who's here somewhere, back in 1989. There's Rhonda. And of course they said yes, and everything worked out pretty well. But I learned so much working under Jim. He truly was a mentor to me. I think the word that stands out to me out of anything else that we describe that man is decency. And in the game of politics that we're in today, it's very foreign to us as we observe the politics of our nation, and even locally and regionally. Jim had a vision for the city. He came in the early 90s when things got difficult for a period, and then things picked up. He had a great vision for Quincy. He worked with the Quincy Partnership trying to bring that pride back. We went through some difficult years in the 80s, post 2.5, and school closings, then city wasn't clean. I could go on and on about that. Jim certainly made his mark. Talk about the library, Clifford Marshall School, Berners-Arnie Edition, the Parker Edition, the first major park improvement plan, $10 million improvement in our parks, on and on. He did so much work to really elevate the quality of life of the entire city. And he worked well with his colleagues. He being a student of government, a teacher in government, he knew how to maximize and leverage things to get what he needed for Quincy. He had relationships with Ted Kennedy, he had relationships with Bill Weld, opposite parties, but he understood the game. He understood it wasn't about the partisanship, it was about getting things done for the people. But at the end of the day, he was a ward council initially. He never forgot that it was all about responding to the constituents, no matter the issue, no matter how small, how challenging, how difficult. He always was responsive. And we live in an age today of social media, as we know, and back then, those door-knocking days, Jim would knock doors. I see Debbie Coughlin and so many people that would have been around helping out, Dottie Cucinato and so many. He'd come back to the headquarters at night after knocking a couple hundred doors. He made personal notes about each door he knocked. The wonderful people in the office typed up the letter. He signed them all, they went back. That is so old school, and it's foreign today. Everything is social media, instant. So he really knew the game. He understood it. He was a master at it, great strategist, and despite some advice from Kaufman in the early years, he turned out all right. So we come together here today. Let's take a moment of silence, I guess, to start the day. Jim was a man of God. Let us thank God for the gift of Jim, the gift of his leadership, the gift of his friendship, and we pray he's now enjoying his place in the heavenly banquet. And we also thank God for his beautiful family, Joanne and the kids. Thank you. To kick off our speakers this morning, I'd like to ask his old friend, hardware man, Ace Hardware, Bob Curry. Everybody knows Bob in Quincy, one of the kindest and most charitable guys in Quincy. Bob Curry, let's come up and share some remarks.
Thank you, everyone. Jim was a wonderful guy. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of crazy things together. I rented a home in Quincy. I grew up in Quincy. My whole life went to St. Mary's School, St. Mary's Church. And then I left and went in the Marine Corps. So when I came back with my first wife, who had passed away with cancer in the Quincy about 30 years ago now, I had rented a home on Cornell Street, and a home came up for sale in Weymouth, and I left for Weymouth. And probably, I don't know, a year later, maybe 2 years later, Jim called me. He said he was out campaigning. He was walking the streets of West Quincy of Ward 4. He says, I found the place. You need to come back. I found the place. So he actually found a piece of land on Malden Street, which is right near Bunk Hill Lane, almost in the Blue Hills. And it was a man named Tamburini that owned it. He had no idea he wanted to sell it until I met him. And it was a really large piece of land. I mean, most of the lots in Quincy are like 5,000 square feet. This lot was 60,000 square feet. So we talked, we chatted, and Mr. Tamburini changed his mind a couple times. I kept going back and sat and had coffee with him. So finally decided to go. I convinced him it was time to retire. But Jim's the one who called and told me about that site. I built a beautiful home up there. I was back in Quincy for the rest of my life, really. Quincy Partnership, the mayor talked about that a little bit. Jim really was the focal point for that. It's a public-private partnership to get us together so that we all would start working to clean up the city, uplight the historical treasures, which this is one of them. One of the first things we uplit in the city, and then we get into doing statues of John Adams and Abigail Adams. Her real name is Abigail Adams, and little John Quincy Adams. So we had those statues made by a very famous artist, and we used to go over in Newton, where I think it was Newton, where his home was, and we'd take the clay models and pinch the cheeks. We were trying to make this John Adams look like Ed Cohane. Eddie, you are a handsome dude. But we did have a lot of fun doing that. But most of the fun was things like the Amazon trip. The Amazon trip was a great trip. There was 5 of us. I put the trip together, and Jim was one of them, and we had Bruce McKilligan, who's passed away. Bruce was a banker here in Quincy, a great friend. Ed Cohane, who's here now. Dick Kirsten, who was a close friend of Eddie's and a good friend of mine. Dick was a wonderful guy. Dick has passed away, and myself. Well, there was 2 people to a room on this ship we were getting on in Iquitos, Peru. Now, it wasn't a ship. I call it a boat. It was probably like 50 foot long. It wasn't very big. There was probably, 8 or 10 passengers and a crew. And so the person I was with was a school teacher from Michigan. A wonderful guy. We had a lot of fun with him. And anyway, before we went in, we had to get shots for all the different diseases and the parasites and everything. So some of them we could get at the old Quincy Medical Center, and one of them we had to go into the Beth Israel in Boston. So I called the illustrious Mayor James Sheets and said, "You want me to pick you up in front of City Hall? And we'll go in." He said, "Yeah, good idea." So we go in, and I'm breathing kind of hard because I've had a bad cold, and I apologize for that. And we go into BI, and I go in first and get my shot, and the nurse says, "Tell Mr. Sheets to come in and get ready, and I'll be in a few minutes." So I go out and I'm getting dressed, and I said, "Jim, take all your clothes off." He said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, you have to take all your clothes off." So it took her a few minutes to get back in, and she came in, and she said, "What the hell are you doing?" He never forgave me for that. He never did. But when we went to the Amazon, we were almost all in, I want to say costumes. We were all in khaki clothes, khaki shirts, khaki pants. We had a hat that said Amazonia on it, and we looked like we were explorers. At Logan Airport, we would lie to everybody that we were working for the CIA. We just make things up, and people would believe us. But Jim, we're trying to help Jim with his suitcase. I don't know, Eddie, if you remember this. We said, what's in your suitcase? She said, "You can't even pick it up." He had a case of water, 24 bottles of water, because he was told you can't drink the water down in Peru. I said, "Jim, they have bottled water there." We landed in Iquitos, Peru, about midnight, I think. It was late at night, pitch dark. We thought Iquitos was just a little small town. It probably was it was in the jungle. There was no way to get to Iquitos, Peru, other than by boat or by plane. And if you had a problem with your plane, there was no way of fixing it. When we landed, there was planes that were pushed off the side of the runway, tipped upside down. You couldn't fix them. There was no one down there to fix them. But we landed there about midnight, and we took a small boat out to our bigger boat, our 50 or 60 foot long boat. And my wife said, don't mention the name of the boat, because she's heard it 1,000 times, she said.
Go ahead, say it.
Was it Lara Esmeralda? Eddie, was that the boat?
I thought it was La Tomalina.
La Tomalina?
I've heard it so many times.
Well, there was 2 different boats, but anyway, we had so much fun when we got on that boat. And again, in the morning, we'd have breakfast together in the back of the boat. And this was in Peru, and we had 2 translators with us. And I'm not sure if they both spoke Spanish or if one of them spoke Portuguese or not, because we spent a lot of time in Peru and not a lot of time in Brazil. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese. But we did have so much fun. I mean, to hear the monkeys screaming, I can still hear them screaming. And we're out in the Amazon, and they had a steel hull. This boat was made down there in Brazil or Peru. And it had a steel hull to it, so you'd hear the logs bouncing off it as we were in the river all night long. And then we were fishing for piranha at one time, and the piranhas aren't very big, they're like maybe 8 inches long, and they're almost all bone. But it was like little kids up at St. Moritz Pond, up in the Blue Hills, would have a bamboo pole with a piece of string about probably maybe 10 feet long, maybe even 5 feet long, with meat on it. Not a worm, but with a hunk of meat. And we'd be slapping the water, and the piranhas would grab them, and then we'd cook them, and it'd take about 30 piranhas to have a meal, but it was just fun to do it. Now you have to remember that the Amazon is 4,000 miles long, just about. And you think from here to LA is like 3,000 miles, so imagine that, a 4,000 mile long river, and it has such force when it dumps out into the Atlantic Ocean. I think it's like 200 miles out that it's still fresh water. It's such an amount of force that goes out. I made a few notes. I think the most fun that we had down there was as we were going along the river, and the boat was not very big. If we had it tied to the bank and we'd get off the boat somehow, and we had these metal stakes we'd drive into the ground and tie the boat up. That's how big the boat was. I mean, it was still a pretty good sized boat. And everything we cooked was, even if they made a cake or dessert, anything had, I can't think, what's the name of the vegetable? It's like a banana shell. Plantains. Everything had plantains in it. They must have grown them on the boat. Everything had plantains, and it was kind of rustic, the eating. But as we were going along the shore one day, and I think it was Cohane, and I'm looking at him right now, that he told the people down there that we were soccer champions. You remember that, Eddie? Yeah. From the United States. Well, their whole life revolved around soccer. I mean, this is how they dated the young girls, the young boys, and they were 12, 13, 15 years old. These people lived on stilts about 8 feet above the water, because when we were there, the water was low, but times of the year it would come in and flood all the area. And so they started following us down the river. They'd come to the next village, tell those people that lie, and none of us ever played soccer. I think Jim said he coached soccer one time, maybe, but he never played soccer. And anyway, we would go up and inspect the field, and we would say, we refuse to play here. There are too many chickens on the field. You remember Cohane? Yeah. So we'd all get back in the boat, untie the boat. Now the crowd kept growing, because they actually thought we were soccer champions coming from the United States. And it's like being a baseball champion or an NFL champion here to these people. So we go to the next field. We refused to play because there was too much water on the field. So I said, we're running out of excuses. So the next field, which is like a mile down, and they're running along the bank, and we pull over, and we're going to play soccer with them. And I think Jim was going to play goalie. He had no idea what to do. He was going to play goalie, and he was big enough to stop that ball. And the rest of us, so what are we going to do? So we decided to kind of play American football. We're going to pass the ball and score. Now, they just froze on the field when we did this. We passed the ball, okay, 1-0. Excuse me. And they said, what are you doing? So the translators then told them. And they started laughing, and they were all hugging us. And so then we split up and made teams. Some of us went with some of them, some of the Peruvians, and someone with the other Peruvians, and we had really a great time. At the end of that, these people were so happy and had so much fun with us. They lined up going back to our boat, and they'd be hugging us and thanking us. And then maybe another 10 people down, that guy looks familiar. Well, they kept getting back in line. All the way down the boat, they wanted another hug. But we'd take pictures of them, and we had a little pin back then, a lapel pin. Tom, you probably remember, it said Light Quincy on it. It looked like a little light bulb, and we had hundreds of them. And we passed them out for a couple of years back here, and I had some left over, and we'd pin it on them. Now, they had no idea it said Light Quincy, what that meant. They thought we were some special people from the United States, ambassadors probably. We probably told them some story. But anyway, we would put a pin on them, would congratulate them. I think we took pictures of them with our cameras. And we just had so much fun, though. It was just a great time. But I think the best time was when I got Jim. Try to remember this, Joanne. Try to remember Jim being completely naked at Beth Israel when that nurse walked in. Thank you, everyone.
Well, you didn't tell you that pin said Curry Hardware under Light Quincy. Next up is someone that goes way back with Jim. Before I got involved with Jim when he became mayor, this gentleman was helping him get elected as ward councilor and state representative, and served as his aide at the State House. He's kind of known as a trickster in the political circles, and I'll let him tell that story about the signs. But Ron went on to do big things. He held a number of positions with the Republican Party across the country, served as President Bush Sr.'s political director in the White House. And to this day, one of my great treats looking back was Jim and I going to the White House and having breakfast in the West Wing with Ron. Never forget that. Ron Kaufman.
Thank you, Shorty. I didn't know that Johnny Carson's younger brother was going to go before me, but it's good to see you. This is not easy. Joanne, I love you. Kids, forget about you. Like many of you, I've known Jim for over 70 years, nearly my entire life, and he was always, always there for me. Sorry. A mentor, a teacher, a friend. A connection to Jim began before I even understood the full measure of what he would mean excuse me, to my life. It began in my home in Wollaston at 36 Sachem Street, a block and a half from Eastern Nazarene College. My mom was very sick most of her life, and we hired a wonderful young ENC student named Joanne to help with my wife, my daughter, my mother, whoever the hell she was. And by the luck of the draw, she had a wonderful, I'm sorry, I don't know, so, a wonderful boyfriend named, to me, Big Jim Sheets. He was young, and he had his own responsibilities and his own ambitions. But he showed up at our family with a kindness and caring that was terribly needed. That's just who Jim Sheets was. Before he was a teacher, before he was a member of the city council, before he ran for Congress, before he had any kind of public title, Jim already had a life of public service. Years later, Jim was to be my professor at the new Quincy Junior College across the street. Classes were mostly at night after the high school used the building. And Jim was our teacher. But Jim, education did not end when school ended. Afterwards, we'd walk across the street to the Erie pub with Jim, and we'd all sit talking about history and government in politics, in public service, in life. He made these conversations very consequential because he made our lives seem very confidential. He treated us as young kids for our ideas and, more importantly, for our futures in our lives. Believe me, when I grew up, I never assumed that the doors of power would be open to someone like me. And not just possible, but worth doing. Things like, in my younger days with Jim, everything that mattered. Like the time when this young guy had to climb up a tree in Ward 4 at 3 a.m. every day for a week to prove that some bad people were dumping rubbish in the Quincy quarries. And it stopped. And believe me, this was just the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg of the many things that we did together, which I'll never talk about, Jim. Never, ever, ever. But Jim made public service feel accessible, honorable, and worth doing. He was a mentor who started my love of government, and made me believe that a person's beginnings does not matter at all. It defines who he can be. Later in life, I had the privilege of working for George H.W. Bush, the President of the United States. I like to say that because I don't believe it myself sometimes. When I got there, it seemed like everybody around me had a fancy degree from Harvard or Yale or Dartmouth, and there I was with my Quincy Junior College degree behind me. But I had something they didn't have. I had a Jim Sheets membership and would not have been traded that for anything in the whole world. I was, in fact, more than proud when Mayor Jim and his trusty aides he'd come to visit me in Washington, and we would sit in the White House mess having lunch or dinner. Two poor kids who had made it, but could not laugh enough about how we got there. And I think my boss, President 41, thought the mayor of Quincy spent more time in the White House than the mayor of New York City. And that went double for all the different agencies that gave a lot of money to Quincy. He taught me, by example, that where you came from matters, but does not determine where you're going to go to with your life. Now Jim's legacy lives in his wonderful family, and all of us who are lucky enough to have Jim in our lives. For me, he'll always be one of the people who changed my life and my direction of life. Jim, wherever you are, my old friend, thank you for showing up. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for making me believe in me and so many other things. And wherever you are now, know that all of us were really lucky to know a coal miner's son from Western Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. On the lighter side, I'd like to share one story. Many of you know Jim drove a Ford Escort diesel, 6'4", giant of a man. It was just interesting watching him getting in and out of it. He was making a trip back home one time, and I had a fairly new, used, I bought it used, it was fairly new, Crown Victoria. And he said to me, boy, I don't know if I'm going to get to Pennsylvania. The Escort's in the shop. I said, well, take mine. Oh, you sure? I said, yeah, take mine. So I only had it 6 or 8 months. I think
We had one car.
we had one car, yeah. But it all worked out. But Jim, some of you know Jim was just a little frugal. And when he came back, I said, how did it go? He says, oh, that car ride's beautiful. He says, but it uses way too much gas. I said, did you want the gas money too? And we had a good laugh. We're going to hear from some of Jim's family members now. We'll start with his favorite daughter. Kim is going to address us and then be followed by her siblings. I spent some time with Kim. She reminded me in Spanish class at North Quincy High School. We were up there together. So, Kim, please.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak today, to remember our father, Jim Sheets, who he was, and what he left behind. When someone lives to be 90 years old, there are many stories that they could tell. In that many years, they have seen a lot, done a lot, and believed a lot of things. They have won, they have lost, they have loved, they have grown, struggled, hoped, changed, and aged. I can't imagine a better blessing than to leave this world peacefully surrounded by family who still love you deeply after 90 years, and by people who genuinely want to come together to remember the life you lived, the things you did, and the legacy you left behind. In the Bible, it says that we know the measure of a person by the fruit their life produces. I know without question that my dad would say his greatest achievement was his children and his grandchildren. He told me that every time we were together and almost every time we spoke on the phone. My father raised 3 boys, my little brothers, and I, and me. And I honestly can say that they are the best men I know. They have built successful lives, and along with their beautiful wives, they have raised amazing children. And each one of them could be a story in themselves. My dad loved 2 places deeply, Quincy and Clarksville. One was a small coal mining town in the hills of Pennsylvania, where people grew up with very little, but the community meant everything. The other was Quincy, rich in history and home to Presidents John Adams and John Quincy Adams. The last time my dad, my dad carried with him both places throughout his life. When I would come home to visit Dad when he was mayor, he would drive me around, showing me all the projects that he was working on and all the things that he had accomplished. He was proud to show me his work, and I was proud of him. But then, as life moved us into a new season, as it always does, Dad longed to go back to Clarksville, to his little coal mining town in Pennsylvania Hills. And in a strange but beautiful way, when visiting him there, it felt very similar to visiting him here in Quincy. Once again, Dad would drive me around, this time showing me the places from his childhood. He showed me the coal mine where his dad worked. He showed me where he went to school, pointed out who lived in every house, and told me all about their families and their family stories. Dad never forgot where he came from. He was deeply proud of his heritage, his family, and the hardworking people who helped to shape his life. And in the end, I believe the true measure of this man's accomplishments were the fruit his life produced. The last time Dad was in the hospital, all he talked about was going back home. His health had become increasingly difficult, and he often felt overwhelmed. My brother Jim drove down again, knowing that Dad would be a terrible patient and probably would try to take a taxi home if he could figure out how to use their phone. Jim got him admitted and settled. Then Luke flew up to relieve Jim so that he could go back to work and to his family. Luke was there when we made the most difficult decision to bring Dad home from the hospital and begin hospice care. He helped Dad make that transition home, and Tad arrived just in time to help Luke move all the furniture out of Dad's office so that hospice could bring in the bed and medical equipment that were needed, and I was scheduled to arrive a few days after that. During a rare, quiet moment in the middle of that move, Dad took Mom's hand and told her, "No man has ever loved a woman as I have loved you." After Dad was settled in, Mom decided to sleep in a recliner next to his bed. Tad was nearby. Dad was sometimes confused about where he was, but Mom would gently remind him that he was home in Clarksville. She held his hand throughout the night, squeezing it whenever he stirred or called out. At one point, Mom fell asleep beside him, and when she woke up, his hand was cold. Dad had passed away at 90 years old in his childhood home, in the office where he spent so much time, holding my mother's hand. I can't think of a more beautiful ending to a life so fully lived.
My name is Tad Sheets. I'm my dad's middle son. I just want to say thank you to the City of Quincy and Mayor Koch for organizing this event today. Thank you to the Thomas Crane Library and staff for hosting us. And thank you all for being here. It's really been a little while since my dad's been mayor, and to see everybody show up today, it really means a lot. So thank you very much for being here today. My dad grew up in the coal mines of southwestern Pennsylvania. He truly loved his childhood there. He'd play baseball till the sun went down. He'd fish the creeks and the streams, swim the swimming holes, and run around with his friends. He truly loved being there as a child. The problem was my grandmother didn't think that the life of a coal miner was for my dad. So through her church, she learned about a college, and that's where she wanted my dad to go after high school. So upon graduation, my dad hopped on a bus and came to Quincy to attend Eastern Nazarene College. He loved being there. He studied history, government, and wanted to be a teacher. After he got his degree, he started teaching. He was a professor at Eastern Nazarene College, Quincy Junior College, and Quincy College. He loved the students. He loved everything about it. He loved talking to them, like Mr. Kaufman said, being with them, and it wasn't just in the classroom. He would challenge the students to chase their dreams. And as it happened, he had one class of students who turned the tables on him. They challenged my dad to chase his dream of running for political office. Thus began his political career. My dad loved being a politician. No matter what office he held, he loved being there for his constituents and their concerns. He loved shaping communities. He loved bringing ideas and visions from the chalkboard to life. He really loved being a politician. He's very proud of this city and just was honored to represent it. I think being mayor was the most important thing in his life. Not the most important. Let me say this. Aside from marrying my mom, aside from my sister Kim being born, my brother Jimmy, and myself being born, aside from those things, I think being mayor was his favorite thing. Even though he was very busy in his professional career, he always had time for family. When we were young, my dad would ref our youth basketball games every Saturday. In the summers, we'd go on camping trips, an occasional trip to Florida, and we would always visit my grandparents back in Pennsylvania. As we got a little bit older, We would take trips to fish the Everglades. We canoed the Allagash up in Maine. And my dad moved from refereeing our basketball games to becoming a spectator, a very loud spectator. But no matter what we did, whether it was a family trip, a Sunday dinner, watching football at the Fours, we always enjoyed our time together as a family. In the later years, my mom and dad moved back to Pennsylvania, back to his childhood home. Now it was time for his children and grandchildren to visit him in the summers in the same way he would take his children to visit his parents in the summer. His life had come full circle, and as he drew his last breath in his childhood home, he left this earth knowing that he lived a full and satisfying life. I'm very proud of the life that my dad lived. I love him very much. I miss him very much. And I look forward to seeing him one day up in heaven. Thank you very much.
All right. Sorry, Tad's pretty short. Again, Tommy, the City of Quincy, thank you guys for all that you've done. Helen, the Thomas Crane Library, all of you folks, thank you. For those of you who don't know, I'm Jimmy Sheets, my dad's favorite son, oldest son. But today we're celebrating the life of my dad. But more than that, I think we're celebrating the way that he lived. Many people knew my dad as mayor. They knew his accomplishments, his leadership, the impact that he had here in the city of Quincy. But depending on who you ask, there are people that knew him as professor, Ward 4 counselor, king of the dump. If you remember that saying, they reminded him, called him king of the dump. And while he was proud of all those accomplishments and those titles, what mattered to him most was never the position, the recognition, or the accolades. What mattered most to him were the people of Quincy. My father loved the city of Quincy with all of his heart, but more than the city itself, he loved the people of Quincy and what it is. And that love didn't just happen. It started from the very beginning. My dad often told the story, and if you were ever around my dad, you've heard this story, how I know one of my siblings mentioned it, dropping him off at the corner of Hancock Street and Elm Ave, and he walked down to Eastern Nazarene College with $37 in his pocket. And he used that money to pay for his first semester at ENC. And he had only made that journey because my grandmother didn't want him to be a coal miner, didn't want him to work in the steel mills. Even though he had a great job working in the steel mills in Pennsylvania, my grandmother didn't want him to do that. She actually filled out his application to ENC and sent it in and made him promise that he would at least come for a semester. My dad had never left Western Pennsylvania, but he loved his mom, and he made that decision to honor what she wanted him to do and came to ENC for one semester. That was it. That was the plan. But somewhere along the way, Quincy became his home. And the people of Quincy became his family. He believed deeply in public service. He believed leadership meant showing up, listening, and helping people when they needed it most. He was truly a leader of the people, by the people, and for the people. In fact, from the very beginning, he made it clear Ron, you probably remember. Do you remember what his first campaign slogan was? I remember that big blue sign in our front yard, elect Jim Sheets, and in quotes, it said, caring makes the difference. And that wasn't just the slogan. That was how he lived his life every single day. When I returned to Quincy in 2020 to work at Eastern Nazarene College, I was overwhelmed by the number of people that would stop me and tell me stories about my dad.
it was story after story about how my dad had helped them. And in some cases, it was big ways, lots of help, but more than anything, the way that my dad helped people were pretty quiet. Most people didn't know the things he did for people. In fact, we took a tour of the police station yesterday. Beautiful, beautiful police station. And someone pulled me aside during that day and said, "Your dad took a chance on me. Bob Curry brought him into my office, and your dad took a chance on me, and here I am 25 years later, and I'm in the place I am today because of your dad took a chance on me, and Bob Curry took a chance on him." So those are the things that my dad did, and literally every single time I heard one of those stories, I learned something new about the kind of person my dad was. Because while many people remember what he accomplished in office and what made him proudest, never the projects, never the politics or the headlines, it was knowing that he truly made a difference in someone's life. I heard a story in here today of someone I didn't realize that my dad had helped. So I'm learning those things every day. The other thing I want to say is I probably would be remiss if I didn't bring this up, but so many people think the life of a politician is all glitz and glamour, right? Some think they're overpaid, or they're only in it for the power. And if we're being honest, we do see a lot of that in politics today. But I want to say this. I don't think our public servants make nearly enough for what they do. Sure, my dad had an opportunity to work with the likes of Ted Kennedy, Ron Kaufman, presidents, senators, governors. He was able to do all of that. But what most people don't see, and Tommy, thank you for your service to the city. I don't think you get enough. What people don't see are the countless 16-hour days a mayor puts in. My dad used to tell his staff, "I want everyone here at 7 a.m. And he'd often come home at 7 p.m. So the countless hours that he put in, the weekends at city events, being a mayor is not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's probably not even an 80-hour-a-week job. You're constantly working 24/7, 365 days a year. Holidays, evenings with family, calls, you have to come in. The other thing is the nights. I can remember my dad coming home at 7 o'clock, warming up his dinner in the microwave, going downstairs in the basement to his office to continue to work on things for the city. He often drew a hard line. You heard my dad was very fiscally responsible, very tight with the budget. But what people didn't see, even though he was really tight with the budget, and he might sit there and say, "We can't pay teachers more, we can't pay the police more, we can't pay the firefighters more, or the city employees," but what people didn't see was how he had sleepless nights working to try and figure out how he could pay them more. That's who my dad was. He loved the city of Quincy, he loved the people, and he always wanted the city employees, no matter who they were, to have the very, very best. Most people don't see those things, and I want to make sure you hear that, because you can draw that line when you're facing the public. But one of the things that he did is behind the scenes. Mom, you know how many sleepless nights he had. He didn't sleep much anyways, but how many sleepless nights he had working for the good people of Quincy. He cared deeply about the legacy and the history of this great city. But more than anything, he cared about and loved the people. Some of my fondest memories growing up were our Saturday mornings when Dad would wake Tad and I up at about 4 a.m., Well, probably 6 a.m. I'm sorry, probably 6 a.m. It felt like 4 on a Saturday. And he would take us down to the original Dunkin' Donuts. And Tad and I would get our donuts and our milk, and we would sit there and we would devour them. But my dad enjoyed sitting there talking to all the locals, listening to what they had to say, dunking his donut in his coffee, and just being with the people. That was what my dad loved. He also, Tad talked about him kind of refereeing some of our games. One of my fondest memories, he would ref our CYO games. Oftentimes we played at Broadmeadows, way back in the day. One of the days when my dad was refereeing, the fans were yelling and screaming at him so much, he called a timeout as the ref kicked all of the fans out of the gym. And if you remember Broadmeadows, those doors were those thin windows. So they sat, you could just see all of the parents trying to look through the window to watch what was going on because he wouldn't allow them back in the gym until the game was over. I could go on and on about stories of my dad because there are just so many. One of my favorites memories, and it really captures who he was. During the blizzard of 1978, after receiving countless calls at our house because people's streets needed to be plowed, people couldn't get out of their driveways, residents asking for help getting their streets plowed, Dad didn't just sit down in his office and make phone calls and ask people to get out and go plow this street, go plow this street. What my dad did is he went down to the DPW. I think he probably had someone from the police department pick him up and went down to the DPW. He climbed in a snowplow himself and rode with the driver all day long until every single street in Ward 4 was plowed. That was my dad. He just wasn't interested in holding office. He believed if people needed help, you got in the truck and you helped. That was his heart, that was his character, that was his leadership. To my father, public service was never about power, it was about people. And that is the legacy that he leaves behind. Not just buildings, not just projects or policies or accomplishments, thousands of lives touched by his kindness and his willingness to help whenever someone needed him. And while the city may remember Dad as mayor, those of us who knew him best will remember something even greater. A man who served with his whole heart, a man who never forgot who he worked for, a man whose greatest accomplishment was the good that he did for others. Thanks, Dad, for showing us what service looks like, for showing us what leadership should be, and what it means to truly care for your community. Because you proved every single day, caring truly does make the difference. Your work here is done, your legacy will live on in this city and in all the people whose lives you've changed. We love you, Dad, we miss you, and Quincy will never forget you. Thank you.
I am the youngest son, Luke, the one that my brother Tad failed to mention. I just want to say a couple quick things before I do the song. It's funny, after my dad died, I heard somebody give an interview and I just remember it because I found what they said so compelling. I'd love to tell you it was a famous poet or that it was, some kind of great politician, but it was Steve Harvey from the Family Feud. He was talking about when his dad died, and I remember him saying, I realized the moment I lost my dad that I just said goodbye to the one man that will ever want me to be a better man than he was. I thought a lot about that, and it's funny, my dad wanted a lot of things for me. He wanted me to be a U.S. Senator, and it wasn't going that way, so then he wanted me to be a general, and then he wanted me to be a professional basketball player. I did none of those things. I became a songwriter. And I will say, he came around on that and was so proud of that. But when I was younger, it used to bother me a little bit. I was like, why does he want me to be these things? I don't want to be these things. And I used to think about that. And after he died, I thought more about it. And it occurred to me that one of the great things about my dad was he didn't want me to be like him. He wanted me to be better than him. And he didn't have very much when he grew up, and his dad gave him everything he could, and he took that, and he came here to Quincy. That's why we're here today. And he did something amazing. He built something, and that brought us to this place. And I think he wants that for me, and for him, I think maybe being a senator was that thing for him. But I also think that this next song, this is why I love this song so much, because he always, I think this song talks about being part of something that's bigger than yourself, and how when you're gone, if you're a part of something that's bigger than you, that goes on. It's funny because he used to take me to the Gettysburg. He loved Gettysburg, and we would, and it's, I was so young, and I didn't have context for why it was so important at the time, but we would get up really early and we would walk on the battlefields, and he would be like, this is where they would march over the hill, and these guys were standing over, and he kind of gave me the whole history lesson, and he would sing this song, he would hum it all the time. And I remember being young, and maybe 8 or 9, and he said, his exact words were, someday I'll be dead, and I really hope when I'm gone, they play this song. And so, I'm going to play it for you. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and glaring lamps. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Thanks.
One of my favorites. Thank you, Luke. The number of colleagues that served with Jim, some here today, I'd ask them to stand. City councilors, state representatives. I know that there's 2 executive secretaries that served under him, Mike McFarland, Senator John Keenan, Chuck Phelan, Tom Fabrizio, Tim Cahill, Steve Durkin in the back there. Did I miss anybody? I know I could speak for all of them. Bruce Ayers, that each of you, all of us, learned a great deal from him. A great deal on how to be a public servant, how to deal with people and treat people. So, thank you guys. I want to thank Helen Murphy and Sarah, our library director, and the staff here for putting things together. We truly, truly appreciate that. I know the connection Jim and Joanne had with the NC, and I got to give a shout out to the NC community, but especially to Charlie and Gladys Caldwell. Way back with Jim and Joanne. Great supporters. So with that, we are going to start a scholarship fund at Quincy College in his honor, and you'll hear more about that at a later time. But we thank the family for making the trip here to share their thoughts about their dad and his contributions to this great city. So we close out the program. We thank you for being here. Jim will be remembered for a long, long time in such a positive way. His contributions live on. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. God bless.
Glory, glory, hallelujah, is true.